loud. Okay. And we are recording. Yes, I see the red dot. Sorry about that. The restrooms are wherever you need to go, so take care of business when you want to. Just make sure you're on mute as we have our guest speaker this evening. Again, I'm Tan Pham. Clarice introduced me earlier, Division C Director. It is my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker of the night. He and I have a lot in common, other than the color of our hair and the facial hair, because he's from Texas and I'm from Oklahoma. We both love barbecue. We're both engineers, and he was a division director as well. He's actually my mentor. Our enhanced evaluations presenter came to California in 1963 for a very short visit from his hometown of San Antonio, Texas. And he liked it so well, just like me, we stayed here in California. In the business world, he was a vice president of 2 Fortune 300 companies and a founder of several startup companies. He also served in various leadership roles in church, community, and academia. He also holds master's degrees in engineering and psychology. Now retired, he and his wife, Andrea, they raise American Kennel Club, AKC, champion mini schnauzers, and grow an organic fruit orchid of over 20 varieties. His hobbies include speaking engagements, investing in stocks, hiking, and perfecting the afternoon nap. Their home is in Somas, just a couple of miles away from me in Camarillo, and they're enjoying a great life. As a 15-year, 2-time distinguished Toastmaster, he has held all of the club offices as well as several district offices. He served previously as the Select Distinguished Division J Director, and currently he is a member of 5 great clubs. Visit them all: TGIF, Elite, Aju, those are great clubs, Leader Pro as well, and Simi Valley Business. This evening, we are very fortunate to have him presenting this leadership lab for enhanced evaluations. Please welcome Distinguished Toastmaster Wayne Sebera. Welcome, Wayne.
It's me. Thank you very much for that introduction, Tan. Greetings, fellow Toastmasters and guests, distinguished guests. It's a real pleasure to talk to you about evaluations. It's one of my favorite topics. Since I grew up in the corporate world, having organizations and working with appraisals and working with job descriptions and evaluations, I was really blessed when I learned about the Toastmaster style of evaluation, because Toastmasters is all about being supportive and helpful and moving people along their path. Tonight, I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts and experiences on enhanced evaluation. So please join me for the ride. I'm going to start the PowerPoint now. You're able to see that opening slide?
Looks good.
I call this the art of enhanced evaluation. It is an art. It's an art and a science. You see, it really takes both in order to be truly effective. You don't need to be very good, but you can develop skills that take you to the top. Our focus on the lab is to really address what is it about meaningful evaluations. How do we make them meaningful? What are the things we do? What are the structures? What are the feelings? What are the inputs? And then I'll talk about a few enhancements, things that are unique now, new opportunities in the virtual world, and et cetera. We're going to focus mainly on best practices. And tonight, I expect you will get your time's worth and your money's worth. Please let me know if you do. We will address all the questions. There were a lot of questions with registration. What about this? Who did that? Where do we go for such and such? We will address all of those questions. Our agenda is basics, enhancements. I'll cover some of the resources available to you. And at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. Why do we do evaluations? It all started with Dr. Ralph Smedley, who founded Toastmasters. How many of you have read his book, Personally Speaking? Can you raise your hand? Anybody read Personally Speaking? It's an amazing book, and it basically gives the principles and the ideas behind Toastmasters. What he says here is that no club fulfills its obligation to members unless we maximize training in constructive criticism, emphasis on constructive. What that's all about to me is about building self-esteem. All of you know the mission statement about building personal growth and those things. That's really what this evaluation idea is about. As our self-esteem improves, we become better speakers. And becoming better speakers, we also tend to improve our self-esteem. So it's a continual, nonstop, hyperbolic growth that keeps going. The key to evaluations being successful and meaningful, they must be genuine and authentic. We don't want to whitewash or repeat or give ideas that are not from your heart. You use your mind, you use your heart, and you use your soul and voice to really connect with another person that you're evaluating. It's a very personal thing to evaluate someone. We recognize strengths and we look for improvements. What are improvements that are happening? How do they get acknowledged? It's really important for us to not use value judgments, but rather to support the person. If you see the footnote on my slides, one of the most important things I learned about evaluations is to create a journal. How many of you are doing a journal now? Every time I hear an evaluation, I learn something. I make a note in my journal. Oh yes, that evaluation was about another person, but it's something I can use. So let me make a note of that. It wasn't very long that I had a pretty complete journal, gave me a lot of ammunition of what to look for. This is what evaluations are all about. Take a moment and look at those key words. Are your evaluations fulfilling these objectives? Are you supportive, collaborative? One of the questions in the registration is, what about collaboration? How do we collaborate on evaluations? We'll talk some about that. Let's go briefly into what is speech evaluation. It's all about listening. Are you a good listener? Listening is one of the keys to being a successful speaker, successful Toastmaster, and it really works in relationships as well. Typically, our constructive feedback, the basic model that starts us off is this Oreo model. It's 3 parts. It's the highlights or recognition. We open our evaluation with highlighting what did we recognize or see about that speech we liked. Something that really is a positive, that gets things moving. Get it on a positive excitement. Then number 2 is a very important part, opportunities to improve or to facilitate improvement. This is an area that sometimes the novice evaluators tend to overlook. Well, gee, that speaker was so good, I don't really want to comment on it. But as Toastmasters, we are looking, no matter what level, to improve. So that second set of opportunities to improve is very important. And then the third part of the Oreo that closes off the sandwich is about a motivation or a coaching. Most important thing about an evaluation is to leave the speaker wanting to come back and give another speech. If you do that, it's been a successful evaluation. We look at performance against objectives. Different speeches have different objectives. So focus your comments and focus on what were the objectives of the speech. And our purpose, of course, is encouraging the speaker. It's a real speech when we give this evaluation speech. It has an opening, it has a body and a close. It has positive reinforcements, opportunities for improvement. It's real important when we're giving a speech to have a little humor in it, some vocal variety, and be entertaining. And summarize. When you're talking to someone else as an evaluator, I am really expressing to you my reaction, my response, what I thought about your speech, what I heard, what I saw. I'm giving my personal opinion. And as long as I do that, it's of value to the speaker. When I'm getting into a judgmental mode, you didn't do this, you should have done that, you failed at this, it has the tendency to be very negative and pulling people down. It's not what we want to do. So we avoid those things. You'll see there the mantra that we use as a basic. Say more about that in a minute. We want to add value for both the speaker and the audience. What's in it for the audience? I'm going to give an evaluation in a way that is true to the speaker, but of the principles and the practices and the ideas that I'm sharing, those will very likely be helpful to the audience as well. I hope my audience is making notes during my evaluation of what they can learn from the evaluation. What about value for your club? The value for the club is we are not only building bonds and community, but we're helping improve everybody. Everyone improves themselves. The level of the club rises, and that attracts even more people. You can see about scoring categories. We'll talk more about that in a minute. How about analysis? How do I analyze a speech? One technique is called the SWAT analysis. Take a blank piece of paper, divide it into quadrants. At the beginning of the speech, you're ready to go. You've got 4 quadrants to make your notes. You're listening attentively to the speaker. You're not distracted, but you're listening with care, listening with depth, understanding what they're saying. And as you do it, you make a few notes. So you may have some notes like these. I noticed the strengths of that speaker. I noticed a few opportunities where it could do a little better, and I noticed some definite weaknesses. These are some of them. There's also a possibility of a threat. One thing the speaker had trouble with was a prop. He reached clumsily for the prop. It was unrehearsed. That's a threat to a total distraction of the speech. But these notes now are my personal notes. They're only for me. If you look at the right of the screen, these notes are the research that you use to compose your speech. You don't read your notes, you use them to compose your speech. I found it's really helpful, and I've observed in excellent evaluators, they tend to deal in threes. What does that mean? Well, there's one evaluation form Toastmaster provides that says, here's how I saw you, here's how I heard you, here's how I responded to you. Those are 3 things. Mother Nature likes things in threes. It's balanced. It's this, that, and the other. All of them fit together. For new speakers, what you felt and saw and heard is probably a good thing to use as the threes for that speaker. For an advanced speaker, you may want to go in the direction of something like Logos, Pathos, and Ethos. Do all of you know what that is? These are from Aristotle. Aristotle said these are the 3 things you need to prove something or to persuade something. The logos is about the logic or the reason. The pathos is about the emotion and the passion. And the ethos is about trust and credibility. When I'm evaluating very experienced speakers, it's this direction I go. I've noticed that a lot of times experienced speakers tend to be either emphasizing the logos or logic and not getting into very much their feelings, or just the opposite, where they totally are talking about all their feelings and here's what was important for me, and they're bringing tears and all of that, but it wasn't very logical. It wasn't easy to follow. So between logos, pathos, and ethos, we're looking for what is the objective of the speech? Was it balanced and effective? And these are just some of the other threes that I have used and I've seen people use. The bottom, of course, is the pathways threesome. How did you excel? What do you need to work on? And here's something you can do to challenge yourself. So deal in threes. Also, after you're developing your journal, you'll find out you're building a list of hip pocket ideas. There's going to be a checklist of a lot of things that you see in speeches. Now that we're in the virtual world, almost every evaluation says, you need to keep your eyes in the camera. I noticed you were looking off to the left. Is that where your notes were? I've noticed that evaluation comment many times. So there's a list that you can develop. And when you have that list, one of the things you want to do is the top 2 bullets here. Minimize what's obvious. You don't need to say a whole lot about eye contact. Hey, look in the camera. You don't need to spend 2 minutes explaining why it's important. Instead, focus on what is significant. It might be significant the speaker did not really develop the persuasive part of the speech, that I was a little confused because the segues between your parts of the speech were a little bit disconnected, and it would have been helpful to me to understand if the segues had been a little bit smoother. So I would focus on what is a significant thing that would help the speaker rather than simply spending time on the obvious. You can see that some checklist ideas there on the slide. One thing that's on the website of the Toastmasters is the winner's idea. Identify goals, define strategies, establish a timeline, and always follow up. Idea. Here's an example of how that works. Here's an idea. Susie, I noticed you were averting your eyes from the audience. That's the idea. So that's the idea I'm going to develop. Number 2 is to develop the strategy. So now I offer not only a corrective idea, but a solution, a technique. One technique I've tried is to think of the individuals as a group, etc., and so forth. So IDEA. Identify goals, strategies, timelines, and follow-up. Follow-up at the next meeting, you might say, I've noticed you're really improving on the segues in your speech. They're really developing a flow that I can understand and follow. So that's the role of the evaluator. There's definitely some no-nos. How many times have you heard an evaluator stand up and simply repeat the speech? I liked it when you said this and this and this, and then when you told us that story about how this happened and that happened, and then I really liked how you did all this. And at the end of the evaluation, you basically had a recap of the speech. Instead, just reference very briefly to the point you're addressing and talk about the value added. Your point that you made about being at on the fishing boat was good. Here's what I would suggest you might do to consider it. Spend a little time describing the boat and the people around you in the water so we really get the feeling of being there. Add the value to what it is you're evaluating. Secondly, do not berate or beat up your subject. It's the worst thing you can do. If I'm going to sit there and simply say where you failed and where you're terrible and how you didn't work very well and I thought you did better last time, that doesn't really add to the value of collaborative support. So don't berate or beat up your subject. And similarly, don't embarrass anyone else. If I'm going to be talking to my speaker, I don't want to embarrass a third party by using them as an example. Well, did you hear Joseph? He did this at the last meeting. Boy, that was funny, wasn't it? And finally, the last suggestion on the no-nos list, don't launch in your own story. When you were talking about that fishing boat, it reminded me of the time that I went fishing. Let me tell you what happened to me in my, see, that's not evaluation. That's storytelling. So keep in your journal these lists of no-nos. And when you're filling in your journal, you might have a separate little department that says, here's some no-nos I've observed. Time is my friend. Typically, you know the red, green, yellow story. Point I want to make here is typically it's a 3-minute evaluation, 2 to 3. In some clubs, for example, Elite Toastmasters, we've expanded it 2 to 4 minutes because we really want to emphasize evaluation. That's an advanced club. Aju also is an advanced club. We spend a lot of time on evaluation. So we really want to focus that we give appropriate time and warning. Here's the downside of that problem. When I'm comfortable with giving 4-minute evaluations, I run over time in the contests. So I was disqualified at the district contest for evaluation a couple of years ago because I went 5 seconds over 3 minutes, over 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm used to 4 minutes, I talk too long. While we're talking about timing, here's something I liked. It's a strange and beautiful feeling when I'm evaluated and supported. Waves of ecstasy pour through my soul. And the boss says, yeah, that's why I only do it once a year. And I'm all tingly, she says. Well, those are some basics you might be thinking about. Let's look at some enhancements. You ready to do that? Give me a wave or a nod if you're ready. Can you still see the slides? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, good. Let's talk about a few remarks in the registrations were about, how about novice versus experienced? When we talk about enhancements for experience level, here's what we're talking about. If your speaker is a novice speaker or fairly new, you really focus on icebreaker style objectives. By that, I'm looking for what are the native strengths in that speaker? What do they already have that they're beginning with? Maybe they have a very clear voice, their articulation is excellent, or maybe they're just naturally able to use vocal variety. Make that a notice, anything that you notice that's an inherent strength. And you may also, in novice speakers, talk about some near-term opportunities. What are the first things you might want to be working on? You might want to be working on your gestures. You don't need to chop your hands through the whole speech, which is a common thing that some people do. You don't need to do that. No. If you have a gesture, there's a point to make. Only use gestures when you're using them to support your point. Near-term opportunities might have to do with the opening. Did the speaker begin with a positive opening that grabbed the attention of the audience? Or did the speaker stumble with the setup or have a bunch of innocuous comments? What was the opening? So you might focus on how was the opening of the speech? What could be improved? And similarly, the closing, did it end on a climatic point with a call to action? Any suggestions you might give? And these novice speakers really are looking at pathways levels 1 and 2 primarily, maybe a little bit of 3. How about experienced speakers? Now we go to the whole different level. I'm now an experienced speaker that's maybe a professional. I'm looking for stage presence. How do they command the stage? How do they connect with the audience? Does the speaker really have confidence, self-esteem, and ability to use the stage, use the props, use the whole stage? Tonight, I'm sitting while I'm giving the speech. It would be much better if I was standing, but it's a long speech and my green screen only goes so high. If I'm standing, I'm out of focus. So I would need to present in a way that was prepared ahead of time. Today, I prepared only for a sitting speech. That might be a critique or a suggestion an experienced speaker would be given. You need to plan ahead with your studio so you can stand when you give your speech. That would be a valid suggestion. I also, on experienced speakers, really look for the flow of the presentation. Does it start with emphasis and does it flow easily from point to point as we move through the speech? Are the segues smooth and natural? Are there jumps and abrupt changes from one thought to the next? Those would be kinds of things I would look for in evaluating an experienced speaker. Typically, an experienced speaker is persuading you about something. Was the speaker persuasive? Perhaps they're merely just presenting some facts. Maybe it's a speech like I gave recently on CRISPR, which is gene editing. That was more of a technical research speech. So that wasn't really about persuasion necessarily, but it was in the sense that I might have persuaded people to explore that topic further. Perhaps I piqued their interest in that subject. Perhaps I led them to exploring on their own. So those would be areas of persuasion you would look for with experienced speakers. Finally, were they prepared and professional in their delivery? And here again, pathways levels 4 to 5 would be the focus for skills, talents, and emphasis. So look at this. We have a range of speakers, don't we? It's a bell curve, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Majority of the speakers you're evaluating are going to be in the middle. Majority of them are going to utilize key elements that you have in your journal that you can draw upon and you can emphasize, yes, these are the areas I see in this evaluation where the person could most improve. And then I also have in my bag of tricks, some things I can do for very early novice or inexperienced speakers, just as on the other end of the spectrum, I've developed my evaluation skills to help even an advanced speaker. The funniest evaluation I ever gave was evaluating Wayne Choate, who everyone knows as an accredited speaker, one of the best around, a professional speaker. He's made his living speaking professionally for years. In one speech during the Elite Toastmasters Club meeting, he gave a 3-minute speech. And I gave a 6-minute evaluation of his 3-minute speech. When you're talking with advanced speakers, experienced speakers, it's a whole different ballgame. Let's look at a few enhancements which we could have discussion around. Here I've listed 5 or 6 that might be of interest at the current time. I'm going to go into a little detail on the first 4, the PowerPoint and the table topics in just a minute. I'll also go into more detail on round robin and speech evaluations in just a moment. But let's talk about team evaluations. Typically in our meeting, we have a one-on-one. We have a speech person, and when you have an evaluator of the speech. Some clubs and some experiences I have seen would have 2 evaluators. One evaluator totally focuses on the voice. What are all of the things about the voice? I don't need to even look at anything physically. I'm simply going to close my eyes and listen to the voice. What was the articulation? What was the emphasis? What was the variety? What were the pauses? What was the pace? What are all of the things about the voice that I can give evaluation about? And you see, by focusing on just the voice, I can now give a much more powerful evaluation on that part. On the other hand, there is an evaluator who only looks at the physical. I'm looking to see what are the gestures, what is the stage presence, what is the use of the stage, use of the camera, use of props, what are all of the physical things that lend to the emphasis of the speech. And finally, I don't really need to hear it, although I would be listening to make sure gestures only support the speech point and are not just random gestures. So between those 2 evaluations, I would be getting a much better evaluation, for example, for a contestant in a speech contest, or for an advanced speaker, or for a person that's about to give a presentation to their company, to the board of directors, or maybe the local Rotary Club. They really want it polished and good, do a team evaluation. A similar evaluation can be done with 3 people. One person only says, here's what I saw. The next one, here's what I heard. And last one, here's how I responded. This is the impression I received. Here's what you made me think about, what you made me go do. Here's what my response would be. Just a couple of examples of how you can do team evaluations. Here again, be creative, be inspired, be exploratory, do something different, have fun with it. Here's PowerPoint and table topics jammed together. Apologize for the very, very busy slide, which is done on purpose. When using PowerPoint, there's 2 things to remember. You have to plan ahead and you have to rapidly prepare. If the speaker is early in the meeting and there's table topics followed by evaluations, I only have a few minutes to put together my presentation. I'm showing you 2 slides from a table topics evaluation that I did. The way I set it up initially was I had 1 slide for the table topics master. In this case was Mrs. B. Some of you may know her. And I noted that she really excelled at stage presence and costumes. This was our Halloween party. So I noted that she showed up in a costume that was beyond belief. It was fabulous. Her questions were excellent, on the point, and to the point, in such a way she managed the time in an outstanding fashion, allowing for 7 speakers. Sometimes table topics masters do most of the talking and squeeze out the number of topic speakers. So one of the things I evaluate is how many people were able to speak. The thing that's not on the slide, but which was mentioned, was her use of the camera could have been better. Now the table topic speakers, I set up a template ahead of time. I decided before the meeting that I was going to look for 3 criteria. Number 1, did they answer the question? Number 2, what did I like about their presentation, or what did I learn from it that I can use? And number 3, what about a suggestion for them to improve? In this case, Jake gave a talk. His question was, what was the funniest thing you've heard? Give an example. He gave a little story about a person who had a crab to his ear, and it grabbed him by the ear, and it was the funniest thing he had ever heard about. And he shared that laughter with us, and we all enjoyed it. So what I liked from his topic, he was very quick with humor. He was able to quickly tell the story, get us laughing, and raise the tenor of the meeting. A suggestion I made to him was the lighting was more behind his face, so his face was not properly lit. In this kind of topics evaluation, you can any of the 3s. Remember earlier I gave you examples of deal with the 3s. Pick 3 things and say, I'm going to use that criteria. Build your templates, make a dozen copies of it. And then all you need to do is type the name of the speaker. What was their question? You can see what the question, I'll just type it right there. And then I'll fill in my 3 evaluation remarks. Then when I give my table topics evaluation, which by the way is now a new thing being done in a lot of clubs. We've been doing it in Elite for about 2 years, but every time we have a guest, they say, I'm going to take that back to my club. And a lot of clubs now are doing table topics evaluations. Next couple of topics deal with round robins and evaluation. How many of you have done a round robin? Probably most everyone's done a round robin. It's a good way to support contestants. For those who haven't, this is how it works. A round robin basically gives the full audience an opportunity to give feedback to the speaker. And it's excellent for polishing a presentation where you want multiple points of view. Usually there will be a moderator such as a general evaluator or the Toastmaster who manages the time and controls who's speaking so that it's done in an orderly fashion. One technique is to make one round around the table or around the list of attendees, asking everyone initially for a positive remark about the presentation. So we'll use the Oreo cookie approach in a sense here. First part of the Oreo is be positive with some positive feedback. So everybody goes around and gives one comment. First person says, I like the positive style of the briefing. Second person, the gestures were really good. Third person, the emphasis and vocal variety was outstanding. And you go around and get all of those positives. Second round, give a suggestion. Second suggestion might be, let's go around the table. Who has a suggestion? I might suggest that he get to the point more quickly. I didn't know what he was talking about. Secondly, is I might suggest that he use better lighting, etc. And finally, after doing those 2 rounds, we go to the 3rd round, and the 3rd round is open mic time, any additional remarks that need to be made, and closing on a high note. That's how we do a round robin. Sometimes we use it for evaluation contests to support our contestants. Here's how the contest works. It's a 5 to 7 minute test speaker who gives a speech. All the contestants listen to the speech, and at the end, they leave the room. They have 5 minutes to prepare their notes, and then they are instructed pencils down. No further preparation at that point. The sergeant at arms brings them in by the number, and they give their evaluation one by one. The first contestant to come in has the opportunity of hearing all of the speakers. However, any contestant with a later number does not hear the prior evaluations. And the person who draws the largest number waits till the end, hears no other evaluations, and has to remember what his comments were. When the contestants come back into the room, they are given their notes back so they can use their notes. And finally, the judges vote. That's how the contest works. That's how the round robin and the contest go together, which is an enhancement you may consider for your future. Contests use this criteria, which I think is important. You can use this criteria for planning your speech for your evaluations. Analytics, how did you analyze the speech? Did you really understand using strengths, weaknesses, techniques? What are the techniques? And next is the recommendations. What did you do offer to help? For example, I had one evaluation contest where the speaker was a fairly new speaker and he was very, very nervous. And as the recommendations, I gave him a lesson in deep breathing, and it was good for all the audience. I said, together, take a deep breath. Do this now, everybody. Take a deep breath, hold it in, let it out. Once you've let it all the way out, go poof, 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 to make sure you've done it all. And then inhale again. Inhaling as much as you can and go 3 rapid inhales and then exhale slowly. Do that a few times. What you see, it oxygenates your lungs. It gives oxygen to your diaphragm. It builds the flow of your blood and builds your self-confidence. That's how you get over nervousness. Those recommendations fills in with the technique of the evaluation. And then finally, a summation. Here are the key points. What I heard, what I recommended, what to do. Thank you for the honor. Contests are usually within clubs, areas, divisions, and districts. It's a lot of fun. Winner's tips, you must add value for both the speaker and the audience. Got to be creative, got to look at all the categories. You have to be entertaining and you have to have fun with it. Are you having fun tonight at all? I can't really interact with you because you're all muted, but I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. My pup over here is really having a good time too. He's sleeping through it all. Well, I have lost contests at all levels, including the district level. District level, as I mentioned earlier, I was 5 seconds over the allotted time because I was looking out at the test speaker and not at the red light, blue, green, yellow, red light. I didn't catch when the red light started. I had more time, I thought. And here was the key distinction that I will share with you now. When I noticed the red light was red and I finished my speech, I stood there. The timer didn't know I'd finished because I was just standing there. He thought I was pausing. So he didn't close the clock till I had paused for a while, enough to disqualify me. Instead, when I noticed it was about time, I should say, thank you, or Toastmaster, or complete, or that's it, anything to designate I'm done. That's how you control that you're done. The other way to lose a contest, what if it's a really good speaker and it's hard for you to come up with a recommendation? It happens all the time. Really reach and go out of your way to say, I know it's a really good speaker and I wish I was that good, but here's what the speaker is looking for. The speaker is looking for feedback that says, in my opinion, it would have helped me understand better if you had done such and such. Or I thought that this would have been an improvement. So what we're looking for is your recommendations, your opinions, your style. The speaker has the option and alternative to take your suggestions or not. And the amazing thing in the contest, when you go to the division or district, you hear 8 or 10 evaluations. They are all over the map. One person will say, you did this really well. The next person will say, you didn't do that very well. And if you notice through the district and division level, the variation of evaluative comments, it's all personal. So what we're looking for, the speaker is looking for, is your personal evaluation. Another reason I lost a contest at the division level, my good friend Katie Porter came up to me afterwards and says, you did an outstanding evaluation and you would have won, except you didn't summarize it. So I had to knock 10 points off your score. Thank you, Katie. She taught me a very valuable lesson and I didn't proceed that year. The other thing, I was distracted by the audience one time. I was looking around the audience and I saw an audience member going, yeah, he was saying, you're doing great. And it distracted me just enough that I got off my thought. Another malfunction was I was giving my speech and I had just begun the speech I looked up and I had the yellow light. I said, wait a minute, I could not have been talking that long, and I didn't realize what was going on. And so I said, is the yellow light supposed to be on? And the timer went, oh, oops, sorry. Meanwhile, my concentration had gone, whoop, it was gone. So when you're speaking, focus on what you're doing. Don't be distracted. Keep your mind clear on what you're up to. Relate to the audience and interact with them, but do not let them capture you. On pathway speeches, one of the things I would like to emphasize, you may not hear, you have a role to play before, during, and after the speech. Before the speaker, you want to ask the speaker ahead of time, what is it you're going to do? What are you looking for? Are there any special things I should be looking for? And I want to emphasize your specific objectives. What are they? That's a conversation to have before the meeting, certainly before the speech, if not at the beginning of the meeting. Then during the meeting, you want to be able to present your evaluation speech. You want to carefully write out your evaluation during the meeting. You may follow it up after with the formal presentation, but be sure you write out enough notes that you can give your speech and you will be able to write the evaluation later. And then after the meeting, you want to fully provide that evaluation write-up. You want to track any progress that you are noting and give compliments and support to that speaker. I noticed you really heard that this was important, and I'm seeing great improvement. One note is if there's any sensitive or private comments you need to make, do it only on a one-on-one basis. You do not put private information out that might be embarrassing or hurtful to someone. If there's something you feel you need to say that's private, do it one-on-one. Pathways resources. I think you're familiar with Toastmasters.org. Everything's online. And if you heard Clarice, she covered some of that earlier in the first hour. Also on Pre-Toast Toast, if you have a club website, when you're the speaker, you can go online, type out your introduction, and download the correct, you can select the pathway you're doing and the speech you're doing, and then download the correct evaluation resource. Download it, save it, and that will enable you to do typing and writing in the form. One thing I've noticed is sometimes those forms don't save the comments. There's a process. You have to save the form before you type your comments and before you send them. Be sure you've saved them. Secondly, I also have experienced that there are certain browsers that it likes and certain browsers that it does not cooperate with. I have 3 different browsers I use. It works fine with Chrome, works fine with Bing, but does not work with another browser which I use. And finally, you want to send that to the speaker. Here's what it looks like. When you get that form, you can see that I've typed in. That's because I saved the form in a mode that I could type. Here, I want to put the name of the speaker. I've put a SAM sample up here to protect the innocent. Speech title is Think and Grow Rich, and I filled in the details of what he excelled at. Put in here my comments about what was excellent, areas then to work on, and then a challenge. This is something that goes above and beyond, but challenges that speaker. Here I said, when you're presenting material from a known resource such as Think and Grow Rich, be careful you're not just reciting the words. Instead, be sure it would be beneficial to give a story or an anecdote or use good vocal variety so we really get the message. And then on page 2, where we do the scorecard, you can see here I've used a variety of levels of scores. And it's really difficult, especially with an advanced speaker, not to just whitewash with all 5s and maybe 1 or 2 4s. But what I try to do is enter comments. You can see my comments for each and every one. It's not just hit the bullets. It's also an opportunity for you to elaborate on your comments. Under clarity, I said you have a nice, clear voice with excellent articulation and flow. Under vocal variety, continue developing your variety of pace, volume, pauses, and other vocal features. Under comments, for eye contact, You mostly looked into the camera. A few times you looked away, but generally very good. Gestures. Use body language and facials as a tool and with deliberation. Be careful of busy hands without a purpose. Audience awareness. I gave him a 5. There was an excellent relatability with the audience, and that also gave a 5 to the comfort level. Under interest, a wrap up was a power packed presentation with lots of good information. Develop your personal stories a bit more. So the idea here is to be supportive, constructive, and helpful to the maximum extent that I can at that moment in time. Resources and role models. You can get some of these tips in lots of places. I've looked on Google and YouTube and Wikipedia. There's an amazing amount of information there. The World Champions of Public Speaking also have seminars, and the National Speaking Association, the NSA, has workshops and trainings that are also very excellent.
Wayne, it is 7:46.
Thank you very much, Tan. We're wrapping it up now. We'll go into the questions very shortly. This is a clip from the Toastmasters.org page about evaluator resources. If you go to that page that's shown here in the title, it gives you 4 links where you can look about make the most of being an evaluator, the secrets to a meaningful evaluation, the effective evaluation manual, which I'll show in a moment, and finally, a Toastmaster wears many hats. This is the manual that shows what does the Toastmaster do, what does the evaluator do, what does the general evaluator do, etc. Here, in fact, is the enhanced general evaluations. If you're the general evaluator, they give you a checklist that you can follow and see if you've done an adequate job of general evaluation. Here's a picture of the effective evaluation manual and a little more elaboration for downloads from a variety of places. So in conclusion, know the basics, use the basics when you're preparing an evaluation. It's like the John Wooden story. John Wooden was a successful national champion in basketball. When he trained his team, he started with, this is the way you put on your socks. And the reason for that is a blister is one of the worst things you can have as a basketball player. So the basics of putting on your socks, that's what's important. So know your basics. Second, innovate. Don't be afraid to try things new. And to feed that, you might explore the resources we've talked about. Remember, evaluations are done supporting the member. It's done before, during, and after. And for Q&A, I think we have had some outstanding material. Are there any questions? And Tan, I would ask that you allow people to be unmuted to see if there's any comments or questions.
All right, question.
Question.
Okay, go ahead. Who was that? The first person that spoke?
That would be Linda Kroll.
Hi, Linda, go ahead.
First, Wayne, what a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I applaud you. I think we should all applaud Wayne. Woohoo!
Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome. I wanted to ask you your thoughts regarding what we're doing now, Zoom, because you have a different array of people who are skilled and less skilled when it comes to electronics. For instance, myself, I'm sitting and you could see all of my background, but this is the closest that I can get to my screen. And I remember I did a speech for Leaders Pro and they said, Linda, you should be closer to your screen. Well, there's no way for me to get closer to my screen. And I'm wondering if there's some kind of tutorial that we could go to and listen to for tips on how to be more effective when giving a speech on the video on Zoom.
Yes, absolutely. There's resources, at least 3 places I can think of, or 4. One is the Toastmasters website has a link for how to conduct virtual meetings. And it goes into a lot of these details about things to do and things not to do. Number 2, those people doing virtual contests, There have been quite a few times now we've done virtual contests at division and district level. And there's a team of people that have evolved a set of guidelines on how to manage those types of things. Your background, your lighting, your coordination, your voting, all of those things, they're all documented. You can find some of those on Facebook. There's also the Zoom website. If you go to the Zoom website, zoom.com, there are a variety of tutorials. And even further, go to YouTube and type in Zoom tutorials for lighting or Zoom tutorials for background and green screen. There's people that are speaking on different techniques that have been used. For me personally, it's been a trial and error. I have tried for a number of times. Well, I've given a lot of speeches. In fact, there's a number of speeches with my background being the windows in the back of my head. And it's always fine in the evening, but when I have my daytime meetings, all the bright sunlight comes in through the back and it doesn't work. So over a period of times, I broke down and I got a green screen. I put the green screen up and you can see where the top of the green screen is. It's the beginning of my bookcase. So what I need to do next is have a higher screen. I need to get up on the ceiling and put some hooks up there. So my studio is evolving over time. It's a trial and answer. Try a little bit, see what works, experiment with it, have fun with it. For somebody to give you an instant answer, if your camera is fixed in your laptop, you're pretty much fixed with that. But I have a movable Logicon. It's fairly inexpensive. I think it was 25 or 30 bucks. It's got a microphone and a camera. It's a Logitech, and it allows me to do a variety of things with it. So anyone else want to offer a suggestion to Linda? Opportunity to share. Raise your hand if you'd like to say something.
Bill has his hand up. Bill
Okay.
Perry.
Yeah, one of the other things I have learned too when you're doing these speeches, especially if you're working with like a contest environment, is if you want to stand, you need to have your microphone close to you. And if it's only in your laptop, you're just not going to get, you're going to have that far away sound. And there are microphones that you can get that do what they call noise rejection, where anything that's more than, say, 1.5 feet, 2 feet away, you won't be able to hear. They only pick up sound in a very local area. So maybe if you were going to stand, you have that microphone maybe 1 foot or 2 away from you, where it'll still pick up your voice, but it won't pick up all the background noise. You can be heard, and you can still be far enough away from your camera that you can be, fit in this whole space. But it's the tip I heard was that if you can't be heard, it doesn't matter what your speech was.
That's true.
That's right.
Good point.
Any other comments? Linda Mann has her hand up. Linda, you're muted right now, Linda.
My comment is you want to get better, visit other clubs around the world, see how they do it. I've been to Australia, Bahrain, New Mexico, and the things they do that we don't do is amazing.
Good
You'll
idea.
become a better speaker evaluator just by visiting other clubs.
I have a virtual question in the chat room by one of the members here.
Yes.
There are speeches that are very technical, and giving an effective evaluation is complex. Any suggestions?
To the extent that you can use slides, it would be helpful. If it's a highly technical presentation, you may want to use slides to emphasize your point. So PowerPoint would be helpful. The other thing for a technical presentation is if you're evaluating somebody who's given a strictly technical presentation, they're wondering how well they did. There's a set of what I'll call simple questions and then a set of complex questions. Simple questions are things like, did you define your acronyms? Did you provide an overview of the material we're going to cover so I have the context of what you're talking about? Another one might be, did you describe the complexity or the difficulty of what you're working on so that I have some measure and feel for what we're dealing with here? Then getting into the complexity questions, you might want to get into a very specific thing like, when you showed me the screen layout that you had designed, it appeared to me that there was too much information on the screen. So I would suggest that you do some engineering of that screen to make it more simple and more user-friendly. So the complexity level has to rise to your level of knowledge. If you as an evaluator are not skilled in those technical disciplines, then you're somewhat limited to saying, for me as a novice, this is what I received from your briefing. Number one, a lot of what technical details you presented were not understood by me. Much of the information could be simplified or explained in layman's terms to be more effective. So that would be perhaps feedback from a novice to an advanced speaker. Does that help? I'm just briefly answering that. Hopefully that would give some ideas.
Looks like our person that asked that question is nodding. Do we have another live question? Anybody want to ask a live question before I go to a remote question? Carrie Kennedy.
Carrie Kennedy. You're muted, Carrie.
Yeah, my question is, do we have access to your presentation?
Yes. Clarice has set up a place on the homepage, the district33tm.org homepage.
Good.
If you go there, there's a Google sharing app. It contains not only this briefing, but all the recent trainings that have been done. Having said that, I must tell you that I have not yet posted my briefing there. I will be doing that in the next day or two.
Fine, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. One question I have from the remote audience is, do you think it's important to tell people that they did the right thing, as well as encourage them in ways they can fix what didn't go well? Like, for example, if you do this speech again, keep this part in because it really resonated.
In my opinion, yes, that's a valid input. Here again, we are getting to the part I described about expressing your opinion. The value of your evaluation is that you are genuine, you are authentic, you are truthful, and you are accurate in what you feel. Remember, I'm reporting on what I saw, I heard, I felt, I responded to. So that's all I can do. If there's a part of the speech that didn't speak to me, yes, I would say it had no value. You might consider leaving it out. Perhaps to another person it had value. This is why it's important for a contest speaker or a professional speaker or someone that has an important presentation coming up to have multiple evaluations, because different points of view, no matter who gives the evaluation, it will only be a portion of the story. Remember, all of us are more knowledgeable and skilled than any one of us.
Very well. Okay, I think I saw another hand come up. Was it with Ian? Did you have your hand up?
Ian, boys, Ian. You're muted, Ian.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
How have evaluations changed, in your opinion, since we went Zoom, since we went virtual? And I'm not talking the low-hanging fruit, but kind of that enhanced evaluation virtually.
Well, the main thing is the PowerPoint, of course. That's technology. Technology enhancements is one major change. With regard to the content of the evaluations, I think people are spending more time on the virtual aspects of the presentation. They're talking about lighting, about background, about how you appear. So that is one noticeable change. And it gets away a little bit from what the core evaluation is about. Core evaluation is about how you came across in your speech. And if we're totally hung up on the visual or the audio, then we may be missing some of the other part of the message. So my advice or my recommendation would be to, I think I had one slide that suggested minimize the obvious and emphasize the helpful specifics. If you briefly say, work on your eyes to the camera, work on your gestures, work on your lighting. That took what, 10 seconds? Now I have the rest of my 3 minutes to really drill down into what was important about the speech. What about the opening? Did it grab my attention when you started? Was the opening full and complete? Did it really lead into your story? Was the introduction given by the Toastmaster a good preparation so that you were set up the minute you started your introduction, you had value. Those are the kinds of things that I'm seeing done less perhaps now because the emphasis is skewed a little bit. We have 3 minutes, fill it up how you will. We fill it up with what's current and important. So my recommendation would be to be sure to look at the full picture.
Okay, I think it's 8 o'clock. I think we should try to wrap it up, and I wanted to maybe ask everybody to unmute, and then we can give Wayne a round of applause. But this presentation is recorded, it will be uploaded, and you all are going to be movie stars because it's online. But let's congratulate Wayne for
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great.
Great, thank you, thank you.
My
All right.
pleasure.
Okay, well, that wraps up the Leadership Lab. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to tell Clarice and we'll get it answered one way or another. But we answered everything we could, and Wayne's presentation was very comprehensive. Thank you, Wayne, very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Great job.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I don't